Hi, my name is Trevor Bowen. I'm a costume designer based here in the Twin Cities. And I just want to talk to you a little bit about what I do for a living, why I do it, and why it's pretty cool. The textbook definition of costume design is the person within a production team that is responsible for all of the accessories, oftentimes hair and makeup, and of course, the raiment of the performer. Uh, how I like to really describe it is I'm a storyteller with clothing. I like to really have really great conversations with performers and help kind of figure out how to navigate this kind of imaginary space that they're in. How can we work together to articulate this character that they're portraying so this person feels as real and as tangible as possible, so that everything feels like an extension of them. So there's this very kind of realistic aspect to what they're wearing, even if it's like head to toe sequin glitter bodysuit with 9-inch platforms. It should feel very real and very natural and very authentic to this performer, despite all the artifice inherent in the entire costume. One thing that I like to do when I get started on a project is to really kind of investigate the script. I don't really think of it as script analysis. It's really kind of like reading the script and not only reading the script, but kind of reading into the script and thinking about all of the gray space that is kind of between those words. That's where clothes live. That's where the emotionality of the choice that one makes in terms of what you wear every day, that's costume design. That's how people choose clothes, whether they admit it or not, whether it's conscious or subconscious. That's how we all choose to wear clothes. We're constantly trying to redefine sort of like, how do I tell the world or hide from the world how I feel emotionally? What do I want to project to the world? What do I want people to see me as? How do I want to celebrate my body? How do I want to hide my body? It's really an investigation I think we all take rather quickly, or we delve into it every single day. My job is to delve deep into it within the context of a production. So as I read the script, what I like to look at is when I find words that kind of sing out to me in a way, I always like to figure out, so what does that mean in terms of what they're wearing? And then when the conflict is involved, and when another person enters the scene, or there's a conversation, or there's a fight, or there's a big group scene or group number, how do all of these clothes relate to each other? Maybe they don't relate to each other at all. Maybe that's actually a quite chaotic vision that we're seeing. One thing that I like to do is really think of the clothes, the costume design as a composition. It's a moving composition. And part of my responsibility is to make sure that we're utilizing things like rhythm, balance, harmony, um, counterpoint, balance, uh, and sometimes a little bit of pacing within the clothes too, to really kind of establish who someone is within the context of a story. How do you begin a costume design? If it's a play, you're most often given the script. If it's an opera, you have the libretto plus the music. If it's a musical, you have the book and the score. For the dance, most often you have the music, sometimes not. If it's a film, you have the screenplay. Sometimes a treatment can come along with that. Similarly, with a commercial or a television project, you're often given kind of a treatment, which is also known as kind of the concept for the piece. The first thing that you want to do is to read the script or libretto or score. Oftentimes, I'll do that before listening to the music if it's an opera or a musical. It gives me a chance to kind of like just read the words and start to maybe get a sense of what is being said before I hear it in a sung through piece like an opera. Once you've done that, I begin analysis. It's kind of like digging into the text, digging into the music. This is a way for me to start to understand the rhythm of the overall piece, how it may shift and change, how harmonies come in and maybe change. When I say harmony, this also applies to a straight play, a scripted piece. One thing that I'm looking for is this gray area that I mentioned before, where emotion often lies, where the space kind of between the words may often tell you maybe even more about a character. What is not being said, you often learn more about someone sometimes kind of through what is not said rather than what is explicitly stated on the page, which is invaluable, I think, for a costume designer. The next stage is going to be your research phase. There's primary sources, there's secondary sources. Depending on the piece, you may have the opportunity to go into the library. You might be watching YouTube clips. You might be watching old television shows. Most recently, I was working on an opera project and I actually had a great excuse to watch some really good situation sitcoms, which were pretty fantastic and actually very invaluable to sort of understanding and kind of inhabiting this very specific type of pacing that this opera had. The next thing that you want to do is often kind of look at extant clothing. This is clothing research where you might be, let's say if you're working on something in the 1970s, you may want to go through like an old Sears and Roebuck catalog. You may want to look at old television shows based in the 70s. It's probably really great to maybe even look at 70s clothes online, whether that be within a fashion context. Sometimes you can even go to like vintage websites and really kind of look at clothes to begin to understand proportion. Fabrics were very different in the 70s from what they are now. There was much less kind of variety in fabrications as well. So you really start to understand sort of shape and proportion. And oftentimes clothes reference previous decades. So you'll see moments within any particular decade where they're actually going backwards in time a little bit. Often you'll see in fashion as well, you see designers that are trying to look forward in time and kind of anticipate a moment, anticipate a vibe, maybe create a vibe. Um, but this gives you a real sense of sort of the landscape of the clothes. All of this work is very, very important foundational work to give you the chance to kind of dream once you really begin kind of the design process itself. The next thing you want to do is create a breakdown. This is similar to a storyboard. Oftentimes you'll see a storyboard used in commercials or television or film. Also, they're used a lot in theater as well with scenographers and scenic designers. This is a way for you to kind of like moment by moment, um, act and scene by act and scene, really break down what is happening. You want to know who is in this scene, who enters and exits, what is happening, what is the point of this conversation. You really want to see like what are the important key elements to capture, to celebrate, to enhance within a given moment. This is a great organizational tool because it allows you to really understand sort of how you're building a clothing story, how you're building a color story, how you're building an emotional arc for a character and for an entire production. It also just helps you really understand sort of beginning, middle, end of it all, right? The next step is going to be rough sketches. So now you're utilizing all of these foundational pieces that you have. You're building this design, right, on a very solid foundation. Oftentimes for me, rough sketches, prelim sketches, that includes maybe a collage of all of this imagery that you found online, oftentimes videos that you may have found online. These are resources that you may have used when you're talking to the director or the art director or production designer to kind of get across sort of like where the clothes fit in within context of this entire story. Sometimes there may even be a production where the set is quite minimal and the clothes actually have um, a lot to do with sort of like telling the story and framing place and time and emotional content. The next thing you want to do is your kind of final sketches, final renderings, final collages. I think there's many, many ways to communicate an idea for a costume design. It's not necessarily always about drawing that gets across the best idea. The best, clearest way that you can find to communicate your idea, that's always going to be the best way. That's always going to be the easiest way for you to communicate with a director, with your fellow designers, and then ultimately the performer or group of performers that you would like to dress for this production. once you have the finals in place, which may also include like swatches if there's going to be clothes constructed, you actually want to have pieces of fabric that show the design team, that show the director what your intention is. I think it's all about as you're designing, as you're analyzing the script, you're always trying to make sure that your intention is staying true to the overall concept and also staying true to each one of these characters. There's no reason to do something that actually is really out of character for someone in a play. You want to make sure that it feels truthful to them, and if that truth may actually feel a little disruptive, that's a good thing. If it's very harmonious, cool. But you always want to make sure that you're coming back to the script, you're coming back to the libretto or the book and the music to understand that does this really fit in with what we're trying to, with the entirety of the story, with the scope of the story that you're trying to tell. From there, you have your images, you have your sketch, you have your rendering, your paintings. And then you go into fittings with the performer. Sometimes when you're in between some of these phases, like prelims or finals, you may actually be in contact and in concert with a performer. I found that that's actually very, very helpful because remember, you're not on an island. You're working with a lot of other people, and it's very important that you understand that the performer, who is not a mannequin, is doing their work as well. And it's actually very helpful to engage that performer and sort of say, this is where I am, this is what I'm thinking, this is what I'm feeling. This is kind of what we're hitting as a design team. I think the sooner that you can share information and the more information you can share, really before you kind of move into working with real clothes or a mock up, the better. It's all about conversation. It's all about communication. Because ultimately, what you want is you want a great communication tool, whether it be the film, the theatrical production, whatever it is. You want it to be clear, and entertaining. So you have had your fittings. They have gone very well. Everyone is happy. The composition feels really harmonious. Now it's time to move into tech, also known as technical rehearsals, also known as tech week. This is the moment where all of the elements come together. And by all of the elements, I mean sound, scenic, lighting, video and projection, um, possibly Foley as well. This is where everything kind of comes together in the space, whether that be the theater, if you're on location for a film, if you're in the studio for a commercial. This is where everything kind of comes together and we really figure out sort of like, how is this working as a total package, as a unit, as this machine of storytelling. For lack of a better phrase. So in Tech Week, that often lasts, as I said, a week, maybe 7 days. Sometimes it can last up to like 14 days. And what you're doing is you're individually going through moment by moment in a story to make sure that all of the elements are working in harmony together. From there, there's often the preview week, which is once you've gone past Tech Week, you have Preview Week where everything is working in unison now, and sometimes the audience is actually watching the show. And what you're doing is you're really refining everything to make sure that it really is clear, that it really is exciting, that it really is intentional, that it's that intent that the director and the entire team has kind of set out with this story. From there, you're off and running, and cheers to a successful production because you're at opening night now. What are aesthetics? Um, Aesthetics have to do with anything that one finds beautiful. Uh, an aesthetic sense can also refer to sort of something that you're trying to achieve within the frame of a production as well. Um, it also has to do, it's also something very personal, I think, to each artist. And I just want to say to you right now, as you watch, that trust your aesthetic sense. What you find beautiful, what you find captivating, what you find spectacular is unique to you. That is the thing that is going to help you stand out in this field. That is the thing that is going to help you to be able to tell a very unique story in a way that no one else can tell. That is going to be the thing that helps define you. So celebrate that, cultivate that, One way can be, as I mentioned before, by reading, by watching a lot of media. As you watch television shows, as you watch your favorite influencers, as you're watching movies, interrogate, investigate why you find it beautiful, no matter what the genre is, no matter how long or short the content may be. Figure out why you like it. Is it because of the color sense? Is it because of the rhythm and harmony? Does it have anything to do with balance? Is it the patterns that are in it as well? Is it the lack of pattern? Is it the multiplicity of textures that are within a garment or within a composition? As you learn those things, as you discover those things for yourself, that will help really kind of define your aesthetic sense and help you kind of and celebrate that and kind of inhabit that space as you're working on a production. Um, One thing that I want to mention too is that there is a danger as you're working on a production to appropriate, to begin a process of sort of extrapolating elements from someone's culture without any knowledge or basis or understanding of why this culture has made certain aesthetic choices. I think it's very easy, given the society that we live in, to sort of take something from another culture because it sounds beautiful, because it looks pretty, because it's unique to you in some sort of a way. Just because it's unique to you does not mean that it's up for taking. It's up for the taking. If you do not understand what you're seeing, investigate that. Again, when you see something in a movie that you like, but you don't quite understand why or what it is, Google it, look it up, figure it out. Taking from someone else's culture is stealing. Taking from someone else's culture is appropriation, and it's wrong. And you're taking the energy away from something that someone else has created. Would you want someone to take the energy out of your design? Absolutely not. So how dare you, or I, for that matter, do the same to someone else's heritage? Education. Why is it important? Is it important? Let me tell you my story. So, growing up in Oklahoma, was very, very interested in theater. And in high school, I started to act. It was the bee's knees. I liked it. I really, really enjoyed it. Um, and then there was just a couple of moments when I realized I don't know if this is the best thing for me. I don't know if this is exactly where I fit into theater land. I know I want to be here. I know I want to be involved in it. I enjoyed the camaraderie. I enjoyed, most importantly, the storytelling and the community behind it and along with it. Um, but I know I needed to know more as I kind of transitioned to kind of learning more about costume design. In my undergraduate program, there was no costume design faculty or costume technical specialist or instructor. So everything that I was utilizing were things that I had either learned in the past from my grandmother or things that I'd seen on television through fashion television shows. But it wasn't really anything that really taught me sort of process. That really taught me a way to kind of tell a story through a garment or ways that I could actually sort of begin to articulate my own process to storytell. Um, so when I went to grad school, that was a place where I learned technique, where I really learned the elements of design, line, shape, color, form, texture. When I learned the principles of design, rhythm, balance, and harmony. And when I really started to understand how to utilize those within a garment, within an entire visual composition of a costume design, and how to really kind of celebrate that. It was very helpful to spend those 3 years to learn how to make clothes in varying ways, whether that is a more kind of mass manufactured way, or a more kind of bespoke way, or very tried and true traditional costuming techniques, costume construction techniques. All of those things are a way for you to understand how to build a garment, how to kind of create volume and structure and layering. As you begin to draw the clothes, you actually really understand what ideally this is going to look like. You begin to understand what fabrics will achieve the shapes that you've drawn in this design. How is the fabric going to relate to light when light hits it? How is it going to refract or absorb the color that is coming at it? How is it going to work in concert with the scenic? How is it going to shape? How is it going to define? How is it going to maybe distort the body that you're dressing? All of these things are things that are invaluable in your toolbox. Now, with that being said, do you need to go to school to learn those things? Not necessarily. Um, is it helpful to have a concentrated learning environment in which to learn those things? For me, it was. It was very, very important. And I don't think I'd be doing what I am doing now if I hadn't had that sort of education. But is that right for everyone? No. Should that be a bar to you joining the field in whatever capacity in costuming? No, it should not. I think there's many ways, especially now, to really achieve that knowledge. There might be a way for you to apprentice, uh, intern, have that paid internship with a costume designer or a costume construction specialist, a draper or a tailor. There's of course YouTube, a myriad of tutorial instructional videos out there to help you learn how to sew, if you want to learn that, how to utilize specific kind of construction techniques, how to kind of build volume within something as well. I think sometimes school can be unhelpful in that you sometimes learn how to do things maybe in not the most efficient way, or you get a sense that this is the only way to do something, where actually I think there's many ways to solve a challenge within costume design, to kind of create something that is aesthetically beautiful to you and also very clarifying and edifying to the story that you want to tell. Hello, I wanted to take you through the process for an actual production. This is through Alana Morris Van Tassel Productions. This was entitled Black Light Research. This was produced March 2021 over at the Cole Center here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. This was a dance piece, it was a contemporary dance piece, choreographed and directed by Alana Morris Van Tassel, and I had the pleasure of designing for her and with her for this project. This project began actually in 2021, and we actually had a year to really talk about for this project to kind of gestate and become really what you're seeing right now. So this is a mood board, research board, R&R, research and reference collage board that I like to use, and this kind of reflects kind of the entire process of the production. As we were talking, this story for Alana was a very personal story to be used in a very public forum. So what we started to look at initially is kind of broke down the piece into kind of four portions: form, shape, headdresses, beading, color, hair decoration, materials, metals, beading, and orishas. Uh, Initially, everything started with Alana's body, as you can see here. It was very important to capture sort of the way that she moves in the world, the way that she wants to move in this piece, the fact that this is a journey of self-discovery for her. We really wanted to start off with her body. What is her rhythm? What is her energy? How does she want to kind of celebrate strength, power, dignity, and poise? Those are really key words as we were working through the process. So we started off with Alana. We also went into like research with Alvin Ailey and Judith Jamison. We also went into traditional Afro-Caribbean dancing through the Yoruba faith. We were also looking at also just imagery, paintings of Black folks dancing and contemporary modern dance as well, contemporary and modern dance. From there, we were really looking at the Orisha Oya, who is kind of the first person, spirit guide that Alana inhabits. So we were really looking at headdresses and how those move and how they undulate and the power that they kind of propel forth in a similar way that Alana wanted to kind of move her body propulsively, increasingly more propulsively through this number. So we're really trying to figure out like how do these beads move? How do these seeds move? And how can we kind of capture that kind of like punctuation in the materials and in the way that we created them for her, the ultimate costume. We're also looking at hair decoration, metals, and beading. Um, Copper is one of the key metals for Oya, so we were looking at a lot of copper. We were just looking at traditional African hairstyles and then African American hairstyles, definitely in the 1970s, with Cicely Tyson and Stevie Wonder, covers of Ebony. We also began to look at Orisha as well. The Orisha are these spirit guides in the Yoruba faith and in this piece, and we wanted to have it a space that felt very contemporary and also very true to the faith as well. So we're really merging kind of contemporary fashion along with the traditional dress as well. Again, to enhance, to celebrate this very personal story, this journey uh, that Alana was going on. So from there, we had these images in place. These words are all from Alana's board that she was working from. So these are all words that she has manifested herself. Through this verbiage, this really identified what her clothes needed to look like. This board overall represents one portion of a night of performance. Alana ultimately had 5 looks that we designed for her. So this is the first look, the invocation look, the invocation to Oya look. From there, I began some line drawings. We had some very interesting iterations that happened in 2020. But ultimately, it brought us to this look, as you can see here. So this sketch was created sort of after multiple conversations, and you can see if you kind of follow our conversations, our visual conversations around form and shape, metals and headdresses. You can see those are all inhabited in this space. What was great about this costume is that I built it myself, designed it myself, and it was something that we were able to work on very closely, which was really great. Um, Another moment that happens in the performance are the Orisha, the spirit guides that help guide Alana on her journey. This is kind of the first iteration. We began looking at images of Afropunk, concert wear, street fashion as well. So we were trying to combine something that felt like something that felt very strong, very spiritual, very tough, very cool, and also very, very specific to each Orisha. You can see here next to the green sketch, the rough sketch here of Ogun, you can kind of see sort of where I was going, where my intention was as we were starting to design face masks. And each of these face masks really kind of contains the energy of the Orisha. So you can start to see sort of the rhythm and sort of how we were trying to capture um, the defining moments, the defining characteristics, the idiosyncrasies of each Orisha. From there, each one of these masks we were built on a black base. From there, I went in and began to decorate, which is sewing, hand stitching. There was machine stitching. There was some dye work involved. There was painting involved. What we were trying to create was something that felt very authentic, very unique, and each mask to be kind of its own little art piece in a way that you could actually kind of not only see it within context, but also look at it kind of on display as well in a way, making something very, very 3D and very textural for the camera. Ultimately, this was I think a pretty successful collaboration. It was conversation throughout, which I think was very, very important. Um, we also were very kind of aware of each other's processes as well, which was really super helpful as we went through this production. In conclusion, what is captivating about costume design is the ability to shape perception through clothing. Each costume is a soft sculpture for the body and is part of the moving composition of a live performance. I create costumes because it gives me the tools to explain and convey information that transcends words. Humans use clothing to project an authentic version of themselves out to the world. This is my first language, and with it, I create theatrical garments for a highly composed version of reality.